right, it's 11 o'clock, so we're going to get started. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us. We even have someone from Spain, which is awesome. We're really excited to have you. My name is Stephanie from Acquia, and we're thrilled to kick off today's webinar, Low Code, the Biggest Change Impacting Content Management in 2021. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any audio issues, please send them in the Q&A tab, and I'm happy to assist you. If you have any questions for the presenters, please also submit them in the Q&A tab, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go along, or as we are concluding the presentation. We've saved some time to answer your questions. Slides and the recording of this webinar will be made available at acquia.com and also sent to you personally via email within the next few days. Without further delay, I'm going to pass it over to Kevin from Acquia and John from Forrester, who will start us off with brief introductions. Over to you, Kevin.
Great, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for joining us on this webinar today. I'm Kevin Cochrane. I'm the Senior Vice President of Product Marketing. Recently joined Acquia at the start of 2020 and have been in the content management industry for the better part of 20 years. Very, very excited for today's webinar because we are at an inflection point in the CMS industry. We're seeing a fundamental transformation on how businesses need to build and deliver digital experiences. And there is no bigger trend and impact on our industry than the advent of low-code, no-code tools. So couldn't be more excited to listen and learn from Forrester here today on the general trend for low-code tools, and then also speak about how we here at Acquia are helping apply those principles to the development of the CMS industry.
Thanks, Kevin. Let's advance the slide, Stephanie. So my name is John Bratincevic, and I started here in Forrester in 2020 as well, but I've been involved with low code for the better part of a decade. And in my view, it's a really important subject, and it's affecting business and software a lot more than we know. And I want to talk about that today. So let's get started. Keep going. All right. So I want to start by framing a principle, okay? In technology and in analyst land, we talk a lot about digital transformation. And that's kind of a heady concept, but we have a definition in one of our papers. We say that to be digitally transformed means your business model has technology at the core. And I try to make this concrete, so I reframe it. I say, okay, if you're digital, that means software is an expression of the business. Like what the business is has to manifest in the software in an ongoing way. So practically speaking, what this means is if you're really digital, if you have a policy, a process, a procedure, an opportunity to capture data, something you want to go after with a product, whatever, you need to implement that stuff in software and quickly, and then continuously improve it. But how do you do that? That's the problem. Next slide. So for digital business, there's a certain priority that goes with this. What we're seeing in the market around software in general is that there's a shift towards more customization, more customer software starting at the front of the business with customer engagement. So those unique experiences, those delightful experiences that customers demand, we need to make those. But that cuts deep. That also goes further into the operations that support them. So just because you had a delightful experience buying a product, it also has to be delivered on time. So if you're a digital business, all this should be manifested in software. What you are, how you express yourself to your customers, and then how you provide value to those customers behind the scenes. Like concretely, that needs to have apps driving it. You need to control those apps and change them in an ongoing way, right? And write new ones all the time. So next slide, please. So there's a little problem. So we want to be digital. We want to express ourselves in software. We want to continuously improve that software. We want to make customers happy and drive quality in our operations and all that. Software is eating the world, but there aren't enough developers to go around. If you go try to hire a developer, a good one right now, you'll find that they're hard to find. Next slide. Thus, because the capacity isn't there, developers are becoming more expensive. There's a bunch of metrics I could have pointed to. We have research on this, on the shortage of classically trained developers who code. But this is a simple one to understand just by the angle of the chart. The mean salary has been going up for years and continues to go up because there aren't enough developers to meet the demand for digital businesses doing digital work. Next slide. And this leads into what we all experience all the time. I experience this all the time, which is messy, invisible, analog ways of doing things in our businesses. This is from a survey we fielded early this year, where we asked process professionals, okay, how many paper dependencies do you have in your business? And how many Excel and email dependencies do you have in your business? So passing spreadsheets around and that sort of thing. We found that about 3/4 had at least a few paper dependencies. And of course, this broke entirely when COVID hit because people couldn't be at their offices to push the paper. And the vast majority of businesses still rely to some degree on Excel and email. As I said, I do this all the time myself. There's so much work that gets done in the job I do where I have to I have to put things into a spreadsheet and somebody has to run a pivot table where we pass different versions of files around or whatever. So this to me is indicative of the fact that we aren't really digital yet, or at least most businesses aren't, because this is how we're actually getting things done in the real world. And this isn't how it should be, because if software is an expression of who we are, if we're digitally transformed, these should be apps that are visible and can be continuously improved and drive quality and provide delightful experiences for the people who are using them and so on. That's what being digital really means. Next slide. So here's the thing. In our view, this is more than a capacity problem. It isn't just we need more classically trained developers and then we'll be okay. It's a culture problem. Next slide. This is a quote from one of our reports. But again, going to this idea of software being an expression of the business, like if you really know what software is and you use it as an advantage and you get things done that way, that means that really it should be part of the DNA of the business. Everyone should understand what software provides and contribute to it. In some way, software is everybody's job in a software-driven environment. Next slide. Problem. This is a quote from a guy I really respect, expert in continuous improvement. His name's Mike Rother. And it's a little heady, but I want to read it to you because it really exposes something deep. We talk a lot about the need to adapt, okay? The need to continuously improve, the need to change how we do business all the time. Well, Mike points out here that all businesses are adapted to some degree, right? We go make positive changes, but those adaptations are only every once in a while, periodic, and conducted by specialists. And in his view, if adaptation is only periodic and conducted by specialists, that means you're not adaptive. Who does this sound like? I think it sounds a lot like a central development team in an IT organization. That's what I think it sounds like. If software is an expression of the business and the adaptation of that software only happens every once in a while based on a limited amount of developers, a few experts who can do the work, that means you're not going to be able to adapt in an ongoing way. That's what that means. Next slide. So here's the thing. We want to be digital businesses, and we want the business to see software as their job, and we want to change that software in an ongoing way. And whether we know it or not, this is what's happening. There's an evolution going on. It's been going on for a while. A few decades ago, just having a computer at all was considered something arcane. There were only one or two on an office floor, for example, and we got things done other ways. But now, at least in white collar work, having a computer is normal. We expect it, right? That's how we get things done, is you get issued a laptop when you get a job or whatever. And over time, as computers became the way of getting things done and software started running our lives, spreadsheets became sort of the lingua franca of executing processes or passing information or whatever, right? And we've had Excel jockeys and have Excel jockeys who basically become experts and turn spreadsheets into little apps. Well, there's another phase going on because the workforce itself is getting more digitally literate, especially younger folks, but people of all ages. We're running our lives on our phones, as we all know. And there's just this imperative to constantly create and adapt software to get things done and express what business is. Business people are starting to do what we consider development work. We call them citizen developers. And often the tools they use, whether they were given them or they went out and found them and ran them on their credit cards, are what we call low code. They're these tools that abstract development. So in our view, this is going on whether you want it to or not. The workforce is becoming digitally literate, and they're figuring out ways to make and execute things in software. And this should be a conscious strategy. We should see this as something that we should direct consciously, that we want people to become developers, that we want people to become software natives, rather than just let it happen by happenstance. So next slide. Which means the customer engagement and the customer operations that I alluded to that express what the business is in an ongoing way. Next slide. Some of that work should be done by business people. If the business is expressed in software, that means business people need to do software work. The order of priorities is starting with the front end, the engagement, and the experiences that affect our customers, cutting back into the operations that support those experiences, and business people should be able to do some of that. Next slide. And that means a form of development. Now, I have a couple terms on here. I don't want to go too deeply into it, but this is from some of our research on how software is delivered generally. We're reframing buy versus build. And what we're seeing is there's a shift from buying pre-made solutions and then customizing them to what we're calling composition. So taking pieces of software, whether it's microservices or low code or whatever, and assembling those into solutions. So basically, if software is an expression of the business, people are participating in software work, that means development. And the overall shift is that development work, at least some of the time, can be done by things we would lump under composition. So stuff like low code, stuff like cloud services, et cetera. Next slide. If we do it consciously, this means shadow IT can be brought into the light. If you're an IT person, you know that this has been a problem forever, that people using Access databases or spreadsheets or whatever, and big operations start running on them, and then the guy leaves and you don't know how it's put together and ends up in IT's lap. One of the benefits of doing this consciously is that we can put that work on managed platforms where it's visible, and we can put guardrails on it and direct that energy in a positive, conscious way. Next slide. And concretely, the category of products where you can do this, where you can easily change things in an ongoing way, where you can allow business people to do the work, where you can develop and redevelop software that expresses who you are in a composition fashion, is what we call low code. So Forrester coined the term low code some years ago, but the key part of the definition is basically the development experience. So basically, products that label themselves as low code should provide this. The development approach should be one where instead of writing lines and lines of code and being trained in how to do that, how to test it, and so on, and all the brain power and skill that goes into coding and making software that way, these products allow you to use visual techniques, what we call declarative techniques. So click and drag, WYSIWYG, simplified syntax for writing business logic, et cetera. The whole idea is that it should be abstracted to the point where someone who doesn't know how to code should be able to do some work and make an app or modify an app or whatever. So this is what low code is, and this is practically speaking how business people can get in on doing digital stuff. Next slide. So this isn't just a theory. We survey developers every year, and this is some data from our last survey. And this is where developers and enterprises basically listed why they were adopting low-code tools within the enterprise. And you can see speed and things like that factor among the reasons, because when it's really abstracted and you can take a piece out and put a piece in and so on, that makes it easier to deliver applications. But you can see one of the top reasons people are buying these products is to do exactly what we're saying, is to enable that evolution, is to enable business people to do work. It's basically, hey, we want to empower employees outside of IT to deliver apps. We don't want that bottleneck of adaptation within just the developer pool. We want business people to be able to deliver these experiences and these operations as well. So this is why people are buying it. That's what they're doing. Next slide. And the really interesting thing is it's starting to cut across software categories. So when Forrester coined the term about 7 years ago, low code basically meant exclusively general purpose application development platforms. That's the category on the right. But what you're seeing is it's moving from a noun. So like low code is a platform product you buy to make apps, to an adjective. So it's cutting across domains. There's specific domain-focused products in low-code that have popped up, but it's also cutting across particular software categories, things like content management and websites, which is relevant to this audience. There's players who are starting to add low-code tooling and market themselves that way and allow business people to develop. Machine learning products. There are no-code or low-code machine learning products now. Also integration. This is pretty well established if you know anything about those players. There's a number of integration platforms that market themselves as low code and have the tooling that's simplified enough where business people can do it. And process automation has always been a kissing cousin with general app development. And they're starting to mature and emphasize their low code tooling as well. All of this is because business people need to do the software work. And what you can see along with that is that persona labels are evolving. So for example, in the integration world, they talk about things like the citizen integrator. That's a thing. I've met a lot of them, business people who take these integration tools and begin to integrate all the SaaS apps inside their department or their business or whatever. Developer, of course, that's the generic term. People are developing apps all the time. Business people are doing this left and right. And also data scientists. So big picture, what you see is, okay, low code is a thing. Business people are doing development work, and the product categories themselves are evolving to enable it and market to it. And we're even coming up with labels that describe the persona and the experience. So it's like a shift that cuts across categories, which is really, really interesting. Next slide. So all this is, I think, very important and very interesting. But I kind of wanted to bring it home with, to me, someone who really exemplifies the archetype of the business person doing technology work. So this is a story I tell often on the subject. This lady's name is Brenda. And she has quite a lot of responsibility at this point. She owns a suite of mission critical apps within her business. It's in telecom. And she works within a very large department in a large telecom company in North America. And this suite of applications does a lot of things. It does HR onboarding and offboarding. It does pay raises. It moves people between managers. It dispatches people to the field work that they do within her department. It tracks operations metrics. It tracks sales data. It produces scorecards. It manages all the supporting functions for all their operations, getting people where they need to go and getting them all the equipment they need and all that. It tracks inventory. If you were to go out and buy this or have it built by an SI or something like that, it would cost a lot of money and take a long time. Well, Brenda owns this big suite of apps that runs everything. And she was the developer and architect. She matured it and designed it over a lengthy period of time. And she works with a group of developers, a group of lieutenants who either add new applications or continuously improve them in an ongoing way. And they're very responsive to the business. They work through problems and needs with the business kind of every day, really. And she's essentially the lead and mentor around this digital ecosystem. So in this environment, they get things done digitally. All their operations are digitized. All their data is digitized. They change it all the time. There's an entire spectrum of roles and developers that contribute to the ecosystem. And the amazing thing about Brenda, click please, next slide, is she doesn't have an IT title at all. She has an operations title. She's an operations director, and she's a citizen developer who grew up. A few years before she was a director, she was an accountant who ran across a low-code platform, ran with it, digitized the heck out of the business she was in there. She got promoted a few levels, moved over to this other environment where there were no tools and were no software, and everything was messy and analog and chaotic. And she digitized the heck out of that. And she taught other people how to do it. And they taught other people how to do it. And she essentially created this continuous improvement culture, but manifested in software, where if there was a problem to solve, you knew you could write an app to do it, or modify an app that existed, whether you were the one writing it or was the person who sat across the aisle from you. She essentially created this environment, this culture where software was how they got things done. I would call it a digital first mindset. And it was all because she had a low-code platform, and it's all completely business-led. She has an alliance with IT who does integrations and things like that, but apart from that, it's her world, and it's beautiful. So when I think of the digital imperative and business people doing software and so on, to me, she's the archetype. We want to go out and create more Brendas because the value here, I mean, it's just immense. The quality, the money they've saved, the new products they've gotten into, the stuff they've done for their customers. Like this is kind of the potential here when we really unleash this, is creating armies of Brendas and their teams. So next slide. It's important to note through all this, because this is sort of, cutting edge stuff. The tools are getting there, the people are getting there, the ways of directing it are getting there, but it's not just provide a product and they will come. You need to consciously think about governance when you go about this. So the way we define governance on this subject anyway is basically asking, okay, if I'm going to get a low-code platform or low-code tools and allow people to use them, I have to make certain decisions. And you can boil those decisions down to like who, what, where, when, why, how, basically. So what are they going to build? Who's going to build it? What process are they going to use to build it? Where's ownership of the platform going to be? What use cases are they going to be allowed to tackle? Or patterns for application development are they going to be allowed to do, and so on. So as you bring these low-code tools in, governance is a factor, and you want to consciously structure it. So you want to direct the positive energy of the business people doing digital work, but you have to make some decisions and structure it with guardrails so you don't create a mess. Next slide. So kind of in light of all this, this is our current set of recommendations. Business people doing digital work is a thing. It's not going away. Low code is the most credible way to do it. And it's also an inherently adaptive way of developing technology. So there's a lot of benefits to that as well. So our basic set of recommendations is to use low code products to drive an adaptive digital first culture. So like what Brenda did, where they got things done in software, and that's how they provided value. With business participation, software work. So the business people are involved, they make apps and continuously improve them, and they begin to think and understand what software can do for them and their department and their business and what have you. And when you're buying software, whether it's this general purpose idea, one of these general purpose platforms, or it's more discrete solutions that do specific things, it's an important consideration to ask whether it has low code features, because if it doesn't, changing it in an ongoing way is going to be harder. If it does have low code features and low code development underneath it, you're going to want to ask what level of skills are required. Is it low code enough for business people to do or not? Also, if the answer is yes, you're going to want to ask, okay, is this a domain where we want business people to do development work, or is it too complex or too risky to allow people who are learning to work on it, right? So that's a decision you have to make. And then if all the answers to those things are yes, we suggest proving it. So actually look at the tooling and say, yep, this is easy enough for a business person to use it, and talk to customers who have used it and actually empower people, business people to do the digital work. Don't just see a quick demo and say, hey, it looks okay, but actually dig into it and make sure it's something that you can really bring to business people that they'll accept and run with. Practically speaking, if you get through all those, you'll want to start small. That tends to be what works well, is starting in an area where there is a lot of digital need, where business people need to get involved and kind of get through the backlog and get things done, which is very often that's operations where the spreadsheets are being passed, but there's a lot of domains where the need is there. And then, as I already mentioned, don't forget governance. So just buying the tool and presenting it isn't enough. You have to consciously think through, okay, what case studies, what processes, what subset of people, what reviews are going to be necessary, et cetera. You're going to have to govern this effort. So last slide. And I always make this point on the subject. This is a real thing, and the potential is enormous. And I absolutely recommend you should do it. But you're going to have to figure some things out, right? There are caveats. Inherently, there's experimentation intrinsic to this. If you want people to learn and then continuously improve what they have, you're going to have to teach them to experiment. You're going to have to figure out your governance models with your products that you use and how to configure them and set the guardrails the most effective way. And just fundamentally, what this involves is, as IT leaders, giving up a certain degree of control, right? Like you are allowing the business to go self-serve or be directed to solve problems for themselves, and you have to be okay with that. So with that, I think we'll go on to the next section with Kevin. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, John. Some really provocative thoughts there. And I thought I maybe would start out by talking about the 2020 imperative. And the 2020 imperative is pretty simple. Post-COVID, we realized that years of digital transformation have led us to a point where we simply haven't been able to accomplish our digital first goals. Now, during the digital transformation process, we very much relied on centralizing transformation efforts in IT and marketing teams to start making decisions on whether to buy or build different types of experience or applications in order to drive our digital transformation. We had a cultural change around trying to be digital first, but at the end of the day, we were making a false choice between buy and build. We weren't driving a cultural change to empower everyone in the organization to apply their knowledge with an appropriate set of tools so that they can compose the experiences that they need in order to drive the customer experience. Now, the lesson learned here is for digital transformation to work, we need to start applying the principles of low code to empower all employees in the organization to take responsibility for expressing their business and their goals to drive the customer experience in software with low code tools. This is having a profound effect on the content management industry. Now, looking back in history, the whole advent of the content management industry was to break a developer bottleneck. When organizations had the imperative to go online, they couldn't rely on a development team or a highly skilled group of specialists in order to get content on the web. There was a massive cultural change to empower business users to take responsibility for building and creating and publishing content online. And that was a very important cultural shift that allowed businesses to reflect the value that they offered to consumers on the web so that customers anywhere in the world on any device could learn about them, do research, and make informed decisions about whether to engage or whether to purchase. The whole goal of a CMS from day one was to get customers the content that they wanted whenever and wherever they wanted it, to drive engagement, to drive conversions, and to keep customers happy and informed and retain their business over their lifetime. It was all about building that culture of empowering business users and breaking development bottlenecks so that you could have continuous updates to your digital experience. Next slide, please. Now, what's happened since the advent of the content management industry is there's been an evolution in the requirements for content based on changing requirements for consumers. We have become much more sophisticated as consumers in terms of our buying cycles and the types of content that we need to have available from all parts of the organization so that we can make informed purchase decisions. In the second evolution of content management, it was not just about breaking a development bottleneck to publish content. It was all about breaking a bottleneck across organizational silos so we can start thinking about the entire customer buying journey so that we can start fueling the most appropriate content at each phase in the customer lifecycle. Next slide, please. And this has now become ever more important and ever more complex because it is no longer about simply publishing content to a website or publishing content to a customer portal or to a mobile app. We now have a multiplicity of different types of experiences that we need to afford the consumer that need to be powered by content. Content that needs to be available in the store, through voice, through chat, through new screens like digital signs, kiosks, wearables, and more. The multiplicity of customer touchpoints, the evolution of the customer buying journey, and the multiplicity of experiences that need to be enriched by content delivered by business users has only grown exponentially. Next slide, please. And what this means is that the fundamental model that we've had for the better part of the past 10 years to drive the customer journey simply no longer works. Now, again, in the initial phases of the content management industry, there was a decentralization of the publishing of content. And as we've needed to move forward with fueling more content across the customer lifecycle, we've actually gone back a bit. We've actually moved to a more centralized model for IT, a more centralized model for marketing, so that we could build new mobile apps, so that we could build new experiences, and so that we could build new global campaigns. And all of this centralization has led to more and more silos. We actually have lost some of the democratization of empowering business users to control what content needs to go to what consumer, where they need it, whenever they need it. And much of this has also been part of our digital transformation plans. Our digital transformation plans over a 5-year time cycle, waiting for centralized teams to rebuild the entire organization, has fundamentally left everyday business users who are closest to the customer, who know best what needs to be modified at any given point in time to be able to adapt to changing customer needs, have been simply disempowered. So the evolution of a traditional CMS between 2000 and 2020 has only been able to get us so far. And here, post-pandemic, we've realized we need a new model, simply put, to go forward. Next slide. And this new model needs to transform CMS and get back to its original roots of democratizing the ability for every business user to take control of the customer experience. Every single regional marketing team, every single line of business owner, every single subject matter expert needs the ability, without having to go to a developer, without having to go to a specialist in central IT or in central marketing, should be able to think through the entire orchestration of a customer journey and what is the compelling content that they need at each phase of their life cycle in order to make an informed decision. We need to empower business users once again. We need to give them the ability to create compelling, personalized, orchestrated experience, okay? Whether that be for content for a digital sign, whether that be alerts that need to go to their mobile phone or to some wearable, whether that needs to be publishing some new application for some new event or some new experience. Business users need the ability to help the organization adapt, because relying on a centralized team to drive all transformation, simply put, is a model that will only hold you back. Next slide, please. Now, what we've seen a lot without the use of low-code tools is as businesses struggle to keep pace with changing customer needs is a lot of what John talked about. Innovation doesn't stop just because you have a centralized team. Innovation just happens at the margin. It happens in the shadows. And so what we see a lot of for more traditional CMSs is businesses going outside the constraints of the centralized platform, the centralized team, engaging small agencies or spinning up small sites, and simply creating a whole bunch of new silos, different points of light to fuel content for the customer experience. Now, unfortunately, this leads to a lot of challenges. It leads to an inconsistent experience. It leads to a journey that's not orchestrated and well thought through. It leads to each part of the business only optimizing for one specific point of interaction to drive their own specific KPIs. And it doesn't have the totality of the customer experience in mind. It also leads to a massive governance problem, both on the data side and the content side, because without central policies, without central systems to manage the process, there's simply risk to the business and risk to the brand. So the question is, how can we transform traditional CMSs? How can we empower everyday business users to collaborate cross-functionally across silos to fuel content and fuel the development of adaptive digital experiences to best meet the customer's need to help fuel their journey? And how do we do that all with great governance? Well, we've solved this problem before in CMS, and here at Acquia today, In 2020, we're here to solve it again. Next slide, please. The key is by transforming CMS, by getting back to the original roots and actually putting the business user experience and making a low-code environment, making certain that everyday business users can do more than publish this content. They can publish any digital experience. They can publish any web application. And they do that with Acquia, with the industry's first low-code tool for business users to democratize publishing, creating and optimizing personalized experiences that can be orchestrated across all functional silos in the business with Acquia's Site Studio. A first ever low-code tool for enterprises and organizations around the planet. Low-code is key to democratizing the publishing of new business capabilities, new business applications, all with good governance and all with the compelling content and personalization that's required to maximize the impact of your customer experience. Next slide, please. The goal, of course, is to help you move faster. In an age where we need to accelerate digital transformation, we want to break the bottleneck of central IT. We want to break the bottleneck of central marketing. We want central marketing and central IT to no longer think about buy versus build. We want central IT and marketing to think about customizing capabilities that can be provisioned to everyday business users. So everyday business users who are closest to the customer can compose the right content and the right experience that's needed in the moment. We want to empower everyone with great governance. And we want central IT and central marketing to think about customizing, again, new capabilities that can be afforded through low-code tools so that everyday business users can take responsibility for driving the customer journey and customer experience. Next slide, please. And the results of doing this can be incredibly impactful. If you think about a traditional approach, central IT, central marketing have a certain capacity for creating and updating a digital experience. And based on assessing business requirements, whenever those resources are available, they can go through a process of building and designing and rolling out a new experience. Now, this central process can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months once it's started, but it's also dependent upon when those resources are available, because as John talked about, specialist resources, developer resources, they're few and far between, and they're very, very costly. So the result of this is with a traditional CMS, your ability to get 50 initiatives done, you might only be able to get 10. Rather than getting those 10 initiatives done in a short period of time, it could take anywhere with the traditional approach, 3 to 6 months. Next slide, please. What we're here to do at Acquia is to turn the model upside down and to truly help you accelerate your digital innovation. The goal here is to rapidly expand capacity. Rather than just doing 10 initiatives, let's empower the whole organization to deliver all 50, because we'll give them the capabilities and the tools that they need so that they can move forward and move forward fast. And let's not make certain that each initiative only takes 3 to 6 months. Let's actually have central IT and central marketing provision the core capabilities and the core helpers that they need so that the business users could rapidly compose whatever experience that they want, and do so, again, not in months, but do so in terms of weeks. This is what we call an adaptive organization. This is an organization that's made the cultural change to truly democratize the ability of everyone in the organization to drive the customer experience. It still has central IT and central marketing at the core to establish the standards, to establish the capabilities, to customize those to the business's unique needs, and to enforce central government. But it's empowering everyday people to be citizen developers, citizen data scientists, so that they can drive the customer experience. Next slide, please. So let's look at a couple of examples from the Acquia customer base that we think really shows a great example of where everyone should be looking to go over the course of the next coming years. First slide. And there's no funner example to start with than a company called Lidos. Now, many of you might not know who Lidos is, but Lidos is a $12 billion government contractor. I live down here in Miami, and so whenever I fly into the Miami airport, I know that I'm in the safe hands of Lidos because they build all of our air traffic control systems, amongst other things. Now, Lidos is a great example of someone that was looking to break the traditional bottlenecks of central IT and have central IT provide core capabilities to the business with good governance and good control, but also give business the ability to move fast and to adapt and to roll out new initiatives. Lidos engaged Acquia because they wanted to take a moonshot and totally transform their model on how they empowered the business to react and to adapt. Now, there is no better example of the moonshot that Lidos went for than the actual moonshot that they needed to support. As a government contractor, Lidos is core to NASA's mission to establish a lunar base. And Lidos needed to roll out a brand new initiative to support the new lunar project and to literally help educate the world and evangelize a new national moonshot. Next slide, please. And with Acquia, what Lidos was able to do by enabling central IT to focus on customizing core capabilities and provisioning new tools, low-code tools to the business, they were able to allow the team that was responsible for building the new literal moonshot web experience to roll out the entire site, the entire multi-channel experience in just 3 weeks. What traditionally might have taken them months to wait and schedule central IT resources, central marketing resources, they were able to devolve to the business and allow the business to adapt and run forward fast, and run forward with safety. Next slide, please. Another great example that we love to highlight here at Acquia is one of our long-standing customers, Bayer. So Bayer, as a global pharmaceutical firm, has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sites, and more sites and more experiences that they're constantly spinning up on a near daily basis. Now, in Bayer's case, prior to provisioning a new platform for digital acceleration with Acquia, they had the traditional problem that probably many of you have with shadow IT and independent teams and marketing groups and IT groups going off and doing their own thing in order to support some new initiative. Bayer was able to centralize a platform for governance and leverage that platform to build the customized capabilities and the customized designs that each and every business unit needed for all of their digital experiences. Then, once it built that centralized digital stack, Bayer was able to roll out Site Studio and our low-code development environment to empower every single regional marketing team, every single product team, and their respective agencies to basically rapidly build and roll out new versions of all of their sites. So complete democratization, but all still within a centralized platform so that they have good governance and good control. They basically reduced the time to roll out new sites, they increased governance, and ultimately were able to empower every single regional marketing team to take control of their own destiny, all once again with safety and control. 500 sites in less than a year. That's right, 500 sites in less than 1 year. That's the power of low code. That's the power of central IT and central marketing, empowering the business and democratizing the ability for every business unit to take control of the customer experience. Next slide, please. Another great example, one of our most recent examples, Close Brothers, who literally not only in the course of weeks, but within 3 days, was able to enable the business to completely design, author, build, roll out a brand new digital experience. From design to launch, 3 days. That's the power of low code. That's the power of provisioning core capabilities to your business users so they could rapidly compose a new digital experience, break traditional central IT and marketing bottlenecks, and get rid of the false choice between buying and building. New tools, composition by the business users, 3 days. That's time to market. That's rapid digital innovation. Next slide. So with Site Studio, this is once again the industry's first low-code environment for business users to be able to create, optimize, and orchestrate an entire personalized digital journey. This environment is enabling you to build any website, any web application, any mobile application with full support for creating experiences that are optimized with pixel perfect resolution for any screen and any device. It's once again a complete low code environment that gives you complete control over all design and all display and all layout, not just of content, but all digital services that your business needs to provision to your customer. It's designed for everyone in the organization, from your customer service team to your customer support team to your in-store agents to your call center agents. We couldn't be more thrilled with taking Site Studio to market, and we couldn't be more thrilled with breaking another bottleneck in the CMS industry to empower businesses to drive their digital transformation efforts. Next slide. And so with that, we'd love everyone to please let us know if they have any questions in the chat. As John noted, low code is the future for enterprise software. It is a requirement for digital businesses. And here at Acquia, we couldn't agree more with John, and we couldn't be more thrilled by helping transform the CMS industry, make a more agile CMS based on the principles of low code.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. We actually have a few questions. I think we'll start with you. Someone asked if they could see the Acquia software in action. I think we got to see a little sneak peek of it there, but what would be the best recommendation and how to see it in action?
Great. So thank you so much for that question, Adam. We would love to engage and bring you up to speed with a custom demo for Acquia CMS and Site Studio. So please reach out to us, and we'd love to get something set up for you.
Awesome. I think this one actually might be for either of you. So either of you can step in on this one. What is the role of the traditional developer in a low code environment?
So John, why don't you start, and then I'll talk specifically in the context of CMS.
Sure. So it depends on the developer. If they are the sort of developer who does not define themselves by writing code, they might be a perfect fit for using a low code development environment because it makes them much faster, right? So you absolutely see that persona. They're experts in Java or whatever, and then they're presented with a product, a low code product, and they run with it, and they're 10 times more efficient and the whole 9 yards, right? They become much more agile, much more productive. If they are not that sort of developer, so they code in their language and that's how they define themselves, then there's still plenty of work for those people to do. They might create custom components for the product, or there are limits to every product category where the tooling ends and code begins. Right now, low code does a really good job of balancing those considerations. So the vast majority of things can be done without code, but there's a lot of use cases where 95% of it's covered by the tooling, and there's a little bit at the end to meet some very unique requirement. So what we see is some developers basically start specializing in that. They create the components or do the little customizations that are needed, depending on the product category or whatever. Or, biggest picture, there are problems that are still need to be solved with code. We think that list of problems is getting shorter, while the list of low code relevant problems is getting a lot longer because these different products are getting really mature. But I mean, coders, there's still a lot of work for those people, right? It's just there's a lot of problems that can be solved by low code, whether it's the same people or other people doing the work. Hope that helps.
Yeah, great, John. And in the context of CMS, I always like to think of it in terms of back-end developers and front-end developers. First and foremost, to be a digital first company, you need to be API first. And your back-end developers need to build the core business capabilities and expose the core APIs to those business capabilities in order to fuel anything on the front end. So backend developers still need to build those core capabilities for the business. Examples being, core commerce capabilities, core ticket handling capabilities, so on and so forth. Now, on the front end developers need to be able to expose those business capabilities in the form of pre-built components that can be assembled and by the actual business user. So just because you have a core set of APIs that expose every single service and every single function to your enterprise, how that gets mobilized in terms of data, content, and presentation needs to be kind of pre-built, pre-packaged, and essentially customized so that it can be provisioned to the business users who can basically choose from an inventory of available front-end components, how they want to, lay them out, how they want them to be exposed on different types of experiences on a different types of screens, and then need to be able to select how best to display and what best to expose in terms of resources based on some personalized customer targeting, right? So without the back-end developer building the core capabilities, without the front-end developer being very strategic and targeted about how those capabilities can be exposed and their ability to build that customized library, nothing can happen with the low-code tool. So the low-code tool is dependent upon still having, like in the case of Bayer and Lidos and Close Brothers, good centralized IT, good centralized marketing. But what they're doing is, as opposed to building this mobile app, that customer portal, that website, they're building the core set of services that the business needs. And then let the business drag and drop and create the mobile app. Let the business drag and drop and create the customer portal. Let the business make daily decisions on how to optimize the experience on a personalized basis, leveraging data and machine learning. That should all be in the business's hand. It actually gets centralized IT and centralized marketing to be much more strategic and gets them out of the bottleneck of change request after change request, initiative after initiative. They build the infrastructure, and then the business builds the business.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Our friend over in Spain, Alexander, sorry. He has two questions here. Is it possible to use or integrate with Excel, Google Spreadsheet, or Airtable? And he also added Zapier at the bottom there as well as Drupal content types.
Yes, great question, Alexandra. So there may already be some existing Drupal components that do data pulls from Excel or Google Spreadsheet. I would need to look that up. But in general, the answer is yes. This is a good example of where centralized IT and developers are still needed. Central IT still needs to define what the content types are and still needs to build the content types. That's a governance issue, right? Having a good defined content model, right? It's an architectural issue as well. For those content types, central IT still needs to build the core backend service to basically pull data from an Excel, from a Google, and pull it into a Drupal content type. So the answer is yes, that can be done. There may be pre-built modules that I'm not aware of that already do that, but we would love to have a deeper conversation with you about what you're looking to achieve there and maybe see how we can help with Acquia CMS and with Site Studio. That would be a fantastic use case to explore with you.
Thank you. And we only have about 4 minutes, so we'll answer these next ones relatively quickly. Another one is, how does low code connect to CRM?
So great example. Again, there's both the backend application modules and then the front end UI modules. So we would connect to CRM, and we have out of the box connectors already today with every CRM, on the planet. And we would basically have, a Drupal connector to basically source customer information from, say, for example, Salesforce. And then how that is displayed and rendered on a mobile app, in a customer portal, in a, an agent portal, maybe in the store, or an agent portal, maybe in the call center. Those kind of 4 different touch points and the various permutations of them. Those would all be exposed as UI components that can be dragged and dropped and maintained by the citizen developer, the actual subject matter expert, within the call center, managing store operations, or just in the marketing department as they need. So already the pre-built connectors to things like Salesforce and other CRMs are already there. And then just at the end of the day, they're all just natively exposed in the low-code environment in Site Studio, so you can drag and drop and create whatever experience you want with that Salesforce data.
Well, I think the next question is probably good for both of you as well. So as a practical matter, is there really such a thing as no-code environment? It seems low-code is reasonable, but I'm trying to understand where no-code could work.
I'll take this. No-code's kind of an aspiration. You can think of it as ultra low code, where the tooling is really tuned to cover a wide variety of needs and use cases without coding or coding concepts. So people, when they say no code, what they usually mean is the tooling set up so that you really don't have to understand coding or coding concepts to use it. And we have maybe a more opinionated way of developing, so that you don't have to write code to meet requirements. You kind of work within the patterns that the product presents to you. So let me be more direct. There are lots of very sophisticated, very substantial applications that have been written without any code in products that call themselves no code. It doesn't mean those products don't allow you to put code in certain places, or there aren't situations where you might have to. But basically it means even less, and they're very focused on limit. So low code is like, we want to be efficient, but we want you to be able to get done what you need done if you have to. No code is more concerned with tuning things to eliminate the need for code if at all possible. It's a nuance, but it leads to kind of different product segments, at least in my view. So I think it's a fairly credible label, even if it's not quite literally 100% true, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. And I think this is a great one to end on. Kevin, this one's for you from Peter. When is Site Studio available, and where can we, one, get training if training is still needed?
Awesome. Well, the great news is Site Studio is available today, and we do have our Site Studio certification program available. So please reach out to either your AE or AM or any of us here in the marketing team, and we'd love to connect with you and follow up on this conversation and walk you through Site Studio personally. But it is available right now today.
Awesome. Well, that's all of our questions. And Peter said thank you, just so you know. So again, thank you all for joining us. We are thrilled to have had you here today. It looks like everyone stayed on, which was awesome to see as well. So we will be sending out the slides and the recording of the webinar today. So if you want to share with any coworkers or colleagues, by all means, please do so. We again, thank you very much for your time. If you have any other questions, feel free to shoot us a note on our website. We can direct them to either Kevin or John, and we'll get back to you soon. But otherwise, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks all.
Thank you all. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Take care.